Hello, everybody. While everybody's coming in, it would be nice if people will show themselves. It's very nice on a webinar to see who's in the room, and so we can be friendly with each other. And one of the things I always like to do, we've got about half the number of participants here, or maybe a third of the number of participants at this moment. But it's always nice to find out where people are from in the country, just to see who's where. I normally live in Melbourne, but I'm in London this evening. So that's might be the furthest away. Is there anyone else from overseas here at the moment? Anyone from London or anyone from Israel? We often have people from Israel joining us. Anyone from Israel or no? Anybody from Queensland? Please unmute
Yes,
yourself.
I'm from Queensland.
Oh, wonderful. Hello, Karen.
My name's Karen Cryer. I'm an employment lawyer from Brisbane, and I'm also the National Vice President, one of the two, of the National Council of Jewish Women of Australia.
Very good.
I'm from Queensland.
Fantastic. Is that Tanya?
That's Lorraine.
Lorraine. It's Lorraine.
Lorraine. I'm from Queensland.
Oh, lovely. Whereabouts are you?
In Brisbane.
In Brisbane. Well, very nice to have you here. Very nice. Do we have anyone else from Queensland while we're looking at Queensland? Not yet? Okay, what about, do we have anyone from Western Australia yet?
Yes, I'm from Western Australia.
Amazing.
And whereabouts are you? Are you in Perth or are you somewhere else?
Yes, I'm in Perth. Yeah.
Welcome. It's very lovely to have you here.
Okay,
Do we have
thank you.
do we have anybody from South Australia?
Yes, I am, but I can't make my picture come on.
So, was that Jen?
Yes, I don't know how to make.
It's so exciting to have people from South Australia here, Jen. We're very, very pleased to have you. Anyone here from a rural area, not a city? Oh, there's Jen. I can see you now, Jen.
Can you?
Yep, that's where you can it.
It's slowly coming on. It's a step.
Do we have anybody here from Sydney?
Is that
Raise
better?
your hands, all you Sydney people. Wave in the screen.
Yeah, I'm from Sydney.
Fantastic. It's lovely to have you. Anyone here who's from northern New South Wales? It's another place, no? What about Melbourne? Do we have any Melburnians? Yeah.
That's our senior there, Courtney from
Courtney, I
Melbourne.
saw. Who else is from Melbourne? Not very many people, not very many Melburnians, by the way. Oh, yes, here's someone else. Oh, Sandra and Liz and Ronak and Abdian and Rosie. Welcome all you Melburnians. It's wonderful to have you here this evening. Okay, I think, do we have anyone from anywhere I haven't mentioned? Tasmania? No? Okay, so now we've got a good number of participants. I think we're going to commence the event. We like to give people a chance, but we don't like to waste too much time. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Melinda Jones. I'm the National President of National Council of Jewish Women of Australia. And as I said to people before, I'm actually in London in the morning, coming to you because I'm enjoying traveling, but of course would not miss an event like this under any circumstances. It's a great opportunity for us to learn and to meet some incredibly brave people. Before we go too much further, I'm actually going to hand over to Ashley, who is a stand-up person, and I'll let her say what she has to say. Ashley.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to start off by introducing myself. I'm Ashley. I am a volunteer for the leadership program. I'm the leadership team for the Aboriginal Partnerships with Stand Up. And I would like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land that I am speaking on today, and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. I also acknowledge that the traditional custodians of various lands that everyone else is on, because we're all online today, and I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders both past and present of those lands as well. I also want to extend my respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are actually joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. And of course, I also want to extend my my respect to Indigenous people, and particularly if we have anybody here today. I just want to say something very briefly about National Council of Jewish Women of Australia and something about Stand Up. This is our first partnership. We haven't done something together before, but it's proven to be a very valuable combination of ideas and skills and all the other things that we need. So collaboration, we both believe, is the way to go forward. Stand Up is a Jewish organisation where they look at the commitment of the Jewish people to a better world. They quote on their website the fact that we are required under Jewish law to improve the world. We're not required to fix it. It's recognised that we can't completely solve the problems ourselves, but we are not free to desist from trying, to take steps. And that's Stand Up's mission. And Speedy, of course, will add more about that in her own words in a few minutes. National Council of Jewish Women has a similar mission in a way, but our focus in that mission is on women. We are concerned about women as Jewish women, women as Australian women, women supporting women as women internationally and as part of the world's community. By focusing on the experience of women, we see a picture that's very often left out. We don't very often, or historically haven't very often heard a woman's perspective on things, and that's something that we seek to address. So I'll hand over now to Speedy Shatari, who is the General Manager of Stand Up, and she's going to then in turn introduce our speakers tonight. Before I hand on, I should say that our topic tonight, of course, is what is happening in Iran and the protests in Iran and the terrible situation that has arisen in the last couple of months. We will know that the Irani soccer team refused to sing the national anthem as a sign of respect. We know that 58 children under the age of 18 have been murdered by the regime in the last month, I think. And we know that many, many, many people have been murdered and injured through these protests. And from our point of view, one of the things that's particularly edifying is that it is the women who are leading the way and leading the charge to try and improve the situation in their country. Speedy, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Speedy. I use the pronouns they, them, and I love my job at Stand Up. I can wholeheartedly say that. Thank you guys for joining us today, and it's amazing to have everyone on board. Before I chat to Naz and Nos, I just wanted to say a little bit about Stand Up and why we're here. Essentially, our whole shtick is to help mobilize the Jewish community and kind of instill a responsibility in everyone within our community to stand up against injustice, no matter where it is in the world. We want to be present and we don't want to be bystanders. And that is exactly why we came into this conversation today. You know, our CEO, my CEO, Courtney, who's on this call, is fantastic, and she posed the idea. And, you know, we thought, what better way to go forth and really create an awareness around what is happening. It's not only a women's issue, it's a human rights issue, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. If you have little knowledge, that's fine. If you have a lot of knowledge, that's also fine. I'm just very privileged as and I just want to say, you know, as a non-binary and trans person, not identifying as a female, I feel very privileged to also moderate this conversation with Naz and Nos. And yeah, we'll have questions, so please just direct them towards in the chat to one of our hosts, and we'll have throughout the discussion, doesn't matter what time, and then at the end we'll have some time for you as an audience and participants to actually ask your questions. I will ask them, but please send your name, and hopefully we can just learn a bit more and see what we can do in the West, but also as human beings to raise a bit more of awareness about what is going on. So with that, I will ask Naz and Nos to unmute themselves and just say thank you so much for being here. And I'm very excited to chat with both of you. You both amaze me and have been on ABC, and I've watched all your interviews. I'm just, yeah, as I said, I'm just very privileged to be able to chat with you both today. I just wanted to first ask, and I might start with you, Nos. For us, we've all seen the news, but are you able to explain maybe what is actually happening in Iran at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Speedy, and to everyone that's gathered here tonight. I also like to pay my respects to Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging, and pay my respects. So today actually marks 67 days since the death of Mahsa Jina Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman, for the benefit of those who may not understand the background or may not be aware of what happened. But the situation was that she was arrested by morality police because of her lack of hijab, or the improper veiling, as you can, as they like to call it. And for that supposed crime, she was taken away, and she was whilst in the custody of the morality police. She was beaten up, she was abused, she was struck on the head, and she unfortunately fell into a coma and she died. So because of the brutal assault, the fatal assault of her by the morality police, she fell into a coma, and an ambulance was called, and the ambulance came over to the re-education facility which she was being held and took her away. Her brother was standing outside trying to work out what was going on, and he could hear her screaming. He could hear screams, and when he tried to investigate, he was told that one of the police officers, or the morality police, had been assaulted. So they were trying to cover it up from the get-go. And I think he spoke to some people on the inside who had said that they witnessed her being assaulted, and he just fled on foot and followed this ambulance frantically to try and get some news, and ended up at the hospital and saw his sister in a lifeless state, in a coma, laying on a hospital bed. And apparently some investigations were held. They were very biased. Obviously, when the person who is responsible for a murder is investigating the crime, you're not going to get an adequate response or a truthful response. And the investigation that was done concluded that she died of natural causes. And eyewitness reports and testimonies dispute this account. It's a fabricated account. It's clear that she was murdered in custody, and just to prove that the Iranian regime was not responsible for the murder, since her murder, they've continually killed many, many people on the streets who have been outraged.
Is that what erupted everything, the death of Mahsa Amini? From what we know, that kind of sparked this revolution.
Yes.
And yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So your background, you're the secretary and spokesperson for the Iranian Women's Association. And how have you guys kind of responded on the ground in Australia and in Iran?
So we have been running awareness raising campaigns. We set up a hashtag one Mahsa too many, because we acknowledge that one death is one death too many, whether it be a woman, a child, a man. One death is one death too many. In Iran, we've seen many people being executed predating Mahsa Amini's murder in custody. And we've seen the flow-on effect of this revolution, of this people's movement that has also resulted in further deaths, further murders. And we've used this hashtag and asked people, members of parliament included, we're trying to get celebrities. Yeah, so we're trying to just generate that awareness and get messages of support and solidarity. I have friends and family in Iran who are very grateful, and they've said that, that they're so appreciative of the fact that we are all the way in Australia, yet we're telling their stories, we're making sure that their voices are heard. So they've reclaimed their voices, and we have the responsibility to make sure that their voices are amplified and echoed across all of the world as well as we can. And that's why we set up this campaign, and we have a petition as well. There are multiple petitions on change.org, on the parliamentary website as well, Australian Parliament website. So the more support we can garner, the better it is, and we can try and push
That's
the.
what I was here today as well, to amplify that voice of injustice that is happening. Thank you, Nos. You guys are doing fantastic work. You really are. And I saw a lot of MPs from all over really engage with that as well. I might just ask Naz. Naz, are you able, if comfortable, to tell us maybe a bit about your background? How did you, because I know we said that you only came to Australia, I think 2019, did you say? 2019, and so, yeah, what led you here? You were born in Iran, is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, I was born and raised. Firstly, thank you for having me here. I would like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. Yes, I did come to Australia as a refugee in 2013. Sorry, I have to correction, as an asylum seeker. In fact, I am still an asylum seeker. I've been living in Australia for 9 years. I was fortunate enough to be able to study and complete a degree in university. I've been working in fields for a while. However, after 9 years, I haven't been given a permanent protection, and I'm still on a temporary protection visa, even though I've proven my refugee status. And sadly, it's not just me. There are thousands like me who are still on protection visas.
Okay. And so are you able, Naz, to maybe just explain a bit about the Iranian regime and what life is maybe like over there in Iran?
Sure. So what people can see when traveling to Iran is quite different to the reality, because the Iranian regime, since since they started 44 years ago, they've been really good at pretending that everything's okay. They've been really good at showing up at multiple different United Nations events and talk about human rights, women's rights, but they're not actually who they talk about, who they say they are. The situation in Iran, Nos explained the background of this movement really well. However, it's very important to know that that Mahsa Amini was just a symbol, and she was in fact a breaking point for the people, because she wasn't the first woman, she wasn't the first youth who was assaulted and killed by this regime. Over the past 44 years, Iran has been violating human rights. They've been violating people from different religious backgrounds. They've been actually, it's a crime to be a member of LGBTQIA community, even kissing a girl as a girl. So they've been violating children's rights. As you mentioned, as Melinda mentioned, there are over 54 children who were killed just during the past 65 days. So this regime has been violating people's rights since 44 years ago.
Yeah. And you know, on that, we know that the status of women in Iran is quite problematic and has been for a long time. Not only women, but also like LGBTQ plus community and other minorities. Nos, maybe you might be able to answer this one. But, and I know Mahsa was the symbol for the change. It was the catalyst. And we even had it on our flyer, and she's the face that everyone knows now. But I'm curious to know what changed, or what was the switch that people are now, because it's incredibly brave and people are risking their lives. Women and girls in schools and students are risking their lives. And I just want to know, because, you know, I ask myself, would I have the same bravery and courage to do what they're doing? Did something change for them? Why now do they have the bravery to stand up for this? I know they have for a long time, but what makes them say this is worth risking my life?
Look, the people of Iran have been frustrated for far too long. Their voices have been stifled for far too long. They've had to put up with all this repression, and the people that we see now on the forefront of this revolution and the forefront of this movement are women and the youth and men. So people, and as well as the LGBTQIA plus community, we see everyone united in a way that we've never seen before. We see people calling out for regime change, putting their lives on the line, and we've seen so much bloodshed. We've witnessed footage of people being violently assaulted, people with bullet holes on their bodies, people that have had their skulls cracked, people with blood streaming down their faces, yet they're wiping off that blood. They're dusting off their boots.
You see those. Is it on the media and the news, or is it from family and friends that you see this coverage?
So mainly family and friends, as well as Instagram. I'd say that social media has been very instrumental in spreading the message of the reality of what's going on in Iran. And I'd say that we only see 5% of what's going on, maybe 10% of what's going on. Yeah, and given the internet blackout, the lack of connectivity, the fact that people need to resort to the use of VPNs to get those messages across and get the messages out there, shows how...
This call who don't know about the media blackout or the internet blackout, you just want to explain a bit about that and what's actually happening on that side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, journalists have, there's no freedom of press. So the only journalists that are allowed to report are journalists that are affiliated with the regime. So you don't get any independent news. Bloggers who dare to defy the regime by providing coverage of what's going on the ground have their voices stifled. They're abducted, arrested, detained, thrown into prison. So Evin Prison, one of the most notorious prisons that's been around since the 1950s, I believe, is known as the University of Evin because it's home to intellectuals, political dissidents, students, activists, journalists, bloggers. The most intelligent cohort of people are stuck within the confines of this prison, and they're subject to so much brutality. There, Kylie Moore Gilbert was also in this prison. Other foreign nationals have found themselves in this prison. Zahra Khosemi, a Canadian-Iranian journalist, went to provide coverage of the protest. And she was arrested and taken into Evin, and 17 or 19 days after her incarceration, she died. She died whilst in the custody of the Iranian regime at Evin Prison, and she was murdered. Other prisoners and eyewitnesses said that they heard her screaming, they heard her crying out. She had been raped.
The police are called the morality police, which is an ironic term that is being used like professionally. It's almost a flip on potentially what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not their place. It's not their place to be dictating to people as to what they can wear, how they can think, what they can write, who they wish to love, who they wish to it's just that there's no freedom of anything. There's no freedom of any sort. We see the way that...
you said in a protest, you were speaking, that even education, for women to receive an education, they have to ask their husbands or a man. Is that right too? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. There's no freedom of movement. There's no... women don't have the liberty... they don't have the liberty to make their own choices. If they want to travel abroad, they need the head of the household, who's a male, or their husband, to give permission to them to travel. I'm a justice of the peace, and I have people in the Iranian community come to me and ask me to witness their husbands signing their forms to give them permission to leave Australia, to travel to Iran. This is back a few years ago, not in recent times. But even as there's just so much control over women's autonomy, women's freedom, women's voice. There's no, women are not at liberty to make their own choices. And that's what people on the streets of Iran are fighting for. They're calling out for women, life, freedom. They're calling out for freedom. That's the only thing they want. They don't want reform. They don't want this regime to bide its time. They don't want the regime to consolidate its power and institute reforms because they've had over 43 years to do so, and they're not interested in engaging with the people. They're not interested in allowing the people to vote.
Right. It's very intense, and I'm sure a lot of people are struggling over there, being restricted for so many years, and when the rest of the world also seeing having more rights, being able, as simple as it is, to go to a Zumba class and be free to move. I can imagine, and you know, that's compared to all the death that is happening. I do want to know from Naz just more about your personal story, if you don't mind me asking. For you, was this a reason why you moved to Australia? Did you see it firsthand how it was impacting women there in Iran? And
Yeah. I think anyone who has lived in Iran even for a year can tell you they've witnessed and experienced obvious human rights and women's rights violations. I was actually 17, so I was legally, based on international laws, still a child when the first time that I was arrested. I was in the big 2009 protest with my mom, and I was just basically walking with everyone else, shouting for freedom, speaking up, and I was arrested. Fast forward, I went to university. Because of that arrest, actually, I didn't get allowed to study what I wanted to study in university, which was law. But I instead chose social communications, which is another form of journalism. And I was a women's rights activist in university. Our rights as students and women were obviously and clearly violated. For example, we had to cover up, like there was a specific type of scarf we had to put on, otherwise we wouldn't get allowed to get into university, whereas for boys there was no limits. And for student accommodation, we had a cutoff time. It was 8 p.m. And if you were there at 8:05 as a girl, yes, you had to find an accommodation for that night because they wouldn't let you in. But for boys, they could just go in and out 24/7. So at the time, I was very angry and pissed off at what's happening. And I worked on a statement with my friends, just explaining the situation to a couple of fellow students, and bringing some statements from international laws as to how women should be treated on 8th of March 2013. And I was, we considered everything as much as we could. In the middle of the night, we distributed the flyers, which were illegal, and they are still illegal. However, yeah, this is 2013. Yeah, so we distributed the flyers, and my friend sadly got arrested the next day, but I was lucky because I went back home to my mom's house. But I got a call saying they found you and they're looking for you. So fast forward, I know we're short on time here. We ended up living in relatives' houses, moving from house to house for a few months in Iran, and we didn't even get access out. Yep.
That was just, were you moving with anyone from house to house?
Yeah, it was me and my parents and my sister, who was 12 at the time.
Right.
Yeah. So we found a good time to exit the country. It was a public holiday. We still ended up bribing 2 guards But we got out of the country and we went to the first country we could get into without any visas and without Iranian passports, which was Indonesia. And from there we were threatened again. So for 28 days straight on, we couldn't even step out of the house because they told our relatives that they know exactly which city we're staying in and they'll find us. So we were basically forced. Our plan was to stay in Indonesia and apply for the UN and become refugees. But we were forced because it wasn't a safe country. We weren't safe. One of our relatives from Australia helped us to find a people smuggler, and we came to Australia on a boat.
Okay. And from that, Naz, that would have been extremely scary, I'm sure, for you and your family. And even like just you distributing flyers can also just prompt that. It is a scary thought as well. Now, also at the time, because of these death sentences for protesters, we know that there are a lot of death sentences coming out. Are we seeing more people seeking asylum, and do people have that safe space to go to in Iran or other countries? I'm just curious about that, like if people have to seek safety in a way for speaking out.
Yes, the Iranians have been seeking asylum for the past 40 years. Nos's family came to Australia as refugees. So did I. There are many Iranians in Australia who either came as refugees or who are living here as asylum seekers because simply the government isn't providing them permanent protection, which goes against what the Geneva Convention states. However, that's the case now. NOS might have the exact number, but as far as I know, there are over 20,000 asylum seekers currently living in Australia, most of whom are from Iran. Sadly, the previous government didn't want to believe our refugee status. That's why they never wanted to. They stated clearly, we would never give you permanent protection. But I think what's unfolding in Iran these days is a proof that there are clear violations of human rights happening on the streets, which is a true reason for becoming refugees and asylum seekers.
It seems like a lot of injustice is happening there. I know everyone on this call has probably seen the news. We can only almost get fed a certain amount of information. So as you even being there in the past and living it, and I'm sure it's a bit confronting for some people to hear, as well as me, obviously. And I feel privileged that you are on this call and that we get to have this conversation as well. And I thank you for that again. So, Nos, I just want to know, or Naz, I'm just curious in terms of like on the women aspect, are there prominent women within the regime who are speaking up with everyone else? Nos, you're welcome to hand it to you.
Sure. Look, the people that end up in parliament in Iran are handpicked and hand-selected by the Supreme Leader Khomeini. So there are a few women in Iran. I think the vice president is female, but they toe the line. They don't speak out of turn. I mean, in the last few days, we saw that 227 parliamentarians in the Iranian regime parliament wrote an open letter to the judiciary calling for the execution of all of the protesters and the political prisoners. So over 15,000 protesters have been arrested, have been abducted, they've been incarcerated by this regime. And knowing that women are at the forefront of this movement, this revolution, You'd
Yeah.
think that female parliamentarians would lend their voice. That's what happens in a modern day democracy. That's what happens in the real world. But unfortunately, the Iranian regime hasn't given people the freedom, or genuine active women the freedom, to nominate themselves to stand for election to parliament. So the people in parliament do not represent the Iranian people, and they do not have a mandate to govern. So therefore, it would be surprising if any of them came up and spoke out in favor of the people of Iran, but it's not going to happen because they toe that line. And they have also been part of.
Right. No, I was just going to say, I saw even actresses potentially speaking out. Is that something that is being done? And if I'm wondering if you have more, let's say, power within society. So let's say even an actor or an actress, are they treated differently to just students or girls at school? And does it matter what age you are, or is it anyone? Let's say even a 12-year-old girl is protesting. Are they treated the same way that maybe an adult is?
Yeah, I mean, there are reports that child soldiers or children have been enlisted to join the repressive forces of the Iranian regime and attack other children. And the morality police and the anti-riot police and the regime suppressive forces are shooting indiscriminately at everyone. They've subjected the Baluchis, the Kurds, the Arabs, the Azaris, the Bakhtiaris to genocide. We've seen the violence that's playing out in Kurdistan at the moment, in Sistan, Baluchistan, and most of the victims have been children. Most of the victims have been men. It doesn't make any difference at all. They're just shooting at everyone and anyone. Even if you're like Kian Pirfalak, he was coming home with his family. They were in the car and the regime's forces just shot bullets. They just fired indiscriminately at their car. He was a 10-year-old boy with so much hope in his eyes. If you watch footage of him, he used to start off by saying, in the name of the God of the rainbow. He was just such a sweet little boy, and I think his father also got shot in that incident, and his mother was saying that there was talk of him saying, look, Dad, Mum, don't worry, they're not coming to get us, we've done nothing, we're not even part of the protest, or something along those lines. And a 10-year-old boy lost his life. He was deprived of the future that every child should be promised. And it just shows how ruthless and barbaric and savage they are. Young children are being raped in custody in Iran, and they're begging their parents for anti-abortion pills because the Revolutionary Guards and the police in the prisons are having their way with them multiple times.
Such a shocking thing to hear, and it's not something you hear on the regular media or ABC or SBS. It's not something they might show, and it's a horrible thought. It's a horrible reality, and it pains me to hear that. Everywhere in the world there's a bit of injustice, but it seems like there's a lot happening there at the moment, and that's one reason that Stand Up and National Council of Jewish Women and the Iranian Women's Association, we came together today. And I remember I was speaking to Nos. It was very funny. Nos and Naz, you guys said, I spoke to you guys separately. I know you guys know each other, but and something that National Council and Stand Up values is compensating our guest speakers with a little bit of funds towards coming and sharing your stories. And Nos, as soon as I said, we'd like to compensate you, you said, I'm donating that straight to a community overseas in Iran. And Naz, that I spoke to you and you said it was your 30th birthday. Was it yesterday or tomorrow? Tomorrow. And you said, I don't, I've just been doing so many protests, and I asked, it's your birthday, what are you going to do? And you even suggested that I might shave my head, or I might cut my hair in solidarity. So the two of you show that there's little things that you can do to stand up or to at least raise the voice of people who can't with the media blackouts and in general of people who don't have the access to reach everywhere. And I guess my last question potentially for the night, and I'll pass it over to the audience after, is we have this concept, Naz and Naz, called Tikkun Olam, and anyone else on the call, Tikkun Olam is a saying, and it means in Hebrew to repair the world. And it's like this need in the Jewish religion to help repair the world. And obviously, after everything, after the Holocaust and all the other things that Jewish people have experienced, we really pride ourselves at our core to not just be a bystander, but to be an upstander. And I kind of want to know from you guys, is there a way that potentially we can help you and help the people over there? Is there anything that us in the West can do, and us in Australia, every human being on this call, is there something that we can do?
Of course there is, but in our culture, we respect people who are older than us. Nose is not that much older than me, but the reason I'm pausing before every question is I want her to respond first, and she's an expert.
No, not at all. I'm happy to do this part collaboratively, given that it's very broad and there's just so much to say. I mean, there are so many actions that our government should be taking and can be taking. And they're very basic. I mean, we know that there are people living amongst us who are financed by the regime or are bringing money over and using their power of attorney to purchase and invest in Australia. So something as simple as, freezing assets and freezing the finances of regime officials and their benefactors and their dependents in Western banks, and enacting targeted diplomatic sanctions, enacting Magnitsky sanctions against the perpetrators of these crimes, and listing the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as a terrorist entity. The Iranian regime is a godfather of terrorism. It has tentacles all over the world. So it needs to have those tentacles cut off. That's the only way that the people of Iran will feel supported, and that's the only way that regime change will be achieved by the Iranian people. And the West need to stop appeasing the regime. They need to stop negotiating with the regime. They need to stop placating the regime. The regime has grown so complacent. It's used to having, United Nations resolutions passed against it. It's used to that. It's equivalent to a slap on the wrist. We need to take definitive action and, refer the criminals, refer the IRGC, refer the regime officials that are responsible for these crimes against humanity to the International Criminal Court when they're outside of Iran. Arrest them. Interpol need to do their job and arrest those that are responsible for these crimes. The regime has massacred political prisoners from 1981 all the way through to 1989. It suppressed the student movement of 1999 and the uprisings, and there were many murders and executions that have taken place.
What was the student uprising? Was it similar to what's happening now?
So the student uprising was in 1999. So the students were taking to the streets and demonstrating against the regime. But what I'm trying to say is that the regime has committed so many atrocities all over the world and in Iran against the Iranian people, and it's never been held accountable. The deliberate downing of Ukraine flight PS752, no one's been held accountable for that. Over 1,000 days have passed and no one's been prosecuted. And all the political prisoners and the dissidents, I think we as a Western community, the Western world, need to band together, put that external pressure on the regime, and call for the UN to do a referendum or an election so that the people can show that they don't want the regime, that will prove to the world that they don't want the regime, and allow the UN to do an independent examination of human rights abuses predating Mahsa's murder and following on from Mahsa's murder. All the crimes against children need to be investigated, and the regime needs to be held accountable for every single death that it's committed and sanctioned. All the state-sanctioned murders and genocides since its inception in 1979.
Yes, yes, those are all very good, tangible things. Naz, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Nos was very concise and accurate, but I guess just to add for the to what Nos mentioned, for the people on this call or even for the stand-up organization, I think the first thing you can do to help us is raise awareness as much as you can. Please use your social media channels, even speak to your friends and family members and tell everyone you can about what's happening in Iran. As Nos mentioned, the footage we're getting and we're seeing on social media is only 5 to 10% of what's actually happening on the grounds in Iran. So since 2 days ago, they've started bringing heavy artillery, tanks and bombs, and they're using them on unarmed civilians in Kurdish cities. So they are, I can't really think of any regime more terrorist than this, and I don't think anyone can deny this regime is a terrorist. So please raise awareness on social media, in person, as much as you can. And to Nos's points, for us to be able to ask the governments, international governments, to action the points Nos mentioned, we need all of you to write to your MPs, to write to anyone you can write to your media, mainstream media channels, and try to put more pressure on politicians so they do the right thing, because this goes against human rights values. It's not just about Iran. It's not just about women. It's about everyone in Iran, including women, children, and people practicing different religions, such as Jewish. So it's very important to raise awareness.
Yes, and we know from, I'm a history buff. I love my history, and the CEO, Courtney, smiled. She hears me talk about it too much, but you know, studying history, we know that pressure on governments to do the right thing and to take action and to not be complicit does work, and is, you know, people sometimes need help, the countries need help, and the people inside it need help to stop the injustice that's happening. And we know from the past that, you know, as well, people aren't privy, or they say, you know, I didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how bad it was. And so I think it's something that and I'm sure everyone else can take away from tonight, is that actually is bad, and it is shocking, and it has been for a while, and it's picked up again because of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old young woman who was murdered. On that, I thank you guys again. I'm going to pass it on to the audience. Everyone here on Zoom, I can see your lovely, lovely faces. Please send your questions through to our awesome Zoom master. I have a few that have come through, and Nos and Naz, if it's okay, we'll just all take a breath, but I will ask those couple of questions that came through, but I'll give everyone just a second to just breathe, kind of like take that information in. It's a lot to hear. I know most of you are probably from the Jewish community, and if we know what's going on or don't know what's going on, there's obviously a lot of injustice happening in the world, and you know, I'm not turning this into a positive thing, but everyone being here is something positive that we're doing. And so please send your questions through, and Nos and Naz.
Speedy, it's Melinda here. Thank you, Nos and Naz, so much. I think we should just hand over to Danielle and she can take the questions from there. I think that's easier than...
You can do that. Takes one less than
Danielle, are you okay to do that?
Sure, I guess. I will start with, I'm sure Melinda has a question because Melinda always has a question. So go for it, Melinda. And then if other people want to put them in the chat or raise their hands, and I'll call on people. So we hear some great things. So go for it, Melinda.
Okay, there are two strategic points that I think that you've made. One is that we could potentially be making statements of some sort which actually would list the sorts of things, Nos, that you raised. You raised a list of different government actions that we might like to start, have our government take as beginning a process. And so one thing we could be doing is looking at, with your help, drafting something of some sort of statements that could come out from this evening, a joint statement by the three organisations. I think that would be very helpful. And the other thing I was going to say is you talked a little bit about individual actions, one of them being awareness, becoming aware, educating yourself, immersing yourself. One of the problems with social media is you only find things out on social media if you're connected to that social media. So the problem is my sources might not be giving me useful information. So perhaps the other thing you could do is tell people a couple of sources they could go to that would provide them with useful information.
I think the easiest way is both myself and Nos are very active on social media. So feel free to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We've been trying to raise awareness as much as we can. Both of us are publishing posts and stories in English and in Persian for different audiences. And I guess from looking at our stories, sometimes you can find the source to that particular article or story, and you can follow that page. One of the challenges we currently have is a lot of the content we are getting from home is in Persian, and there's so many videos and so many news reports from different cities. I'm a professional interpreter, and I know Nos has been trying to interpret as well, but we just don't get a chance to translate everything into English. But there are some good channels that provide as much updates as they can, including myself and Nos.
Thank you. I've just seen that the Zoom master has written in the chat Twitter and Instagram names. So your handles are just your names. So people should be able to find that information.
Yes, correct. And that's my full name, Sarah Naz. So if you look up my full name, you'll find my Twitter and Instagram.
Well, my Twitter was hacked. So I don't have a Twitter account anymore, but I'm on Instagram. And the Iranian Women's Association has a Facebook page as well, and that's where we post most of our videos as part of the hashtag One Masala Too Many campaign. And even something as simple as joining that campaign is useful because we can keep spreading it, and it sort of localizes the message a little bit more.
It does. I've seen it. All of the MPs have hashtagged that and have posted it, and I've seen that on the Iranian Women's Association page. It's fantastic.
Okay, thank you so much. And that information is in the chat again. Danielle, over to you.
Thank you very much. One of the things that Naz mentioned earlier was the respect for your elders. And one of the questions is about whether women of different ages are coming together, and whether we've heard about the students' revolution and stuff. Is this across generations that people are fighting back?
Yes, for sure it is. Women and youth are at the front row of this revolution. And I say revolution because this is a revolution. These aren't a series of protests. However, people from different ages, from different ethnicities are behind the revolution. Just today, I was in an all-day strike in Sydney Town Hall. It was a SNAP protest we had against the brutalities of the regime and using them using heavy artillery. And there were a couple of women who were about probably 60, 70-year-old, and they came to me. They told me, thank you for doing all you can as women and youth, but we wanted to let you know that we are behind you. It doesn't matter if we barely make it to this protest, we are still supporting you in any way we can. So this is definitely, this revolution is coming from different ages and different genders.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's definitely cross-generational. What we saw at previous uprisings in Iran was just based on my own conversations with family and friends in Iran and people that have come and visited, I know that parents often stopped their children from taking to the streets previously. They stopped their loved ones, they stopped their family members because they have first-hand experience of how repressive the regime is, and they knew the dangers and the risks that their children were taking. So to protect their children from abuse and arrest and execution and murder, they stopped their children. Whereas now, even the parents are encouraging their children to take to the streets. They're saying goodbye to their children every day, just in case it's the last time they see each other. And you also see the bravery and the sacrifice that these parents are making after their children have been taken away from them and murdered by the regime just for participating in the uprisings and the revolution. They're saying, don't offer your condolences. Go finish off what my child started. Go continue the fight that the children of Iran and the women and the men, the brave people of Iran have started. Continue that, and that is equivalent to offering your condolences.
What a powerful message of families knowing that if we want change, we need to unite and unfortunately risk ourselves. We've had a number of questions about what does the future look like and what would your ideal future for Iran look like? So is democratic government a goal? Do you think there's a chance of the regime being overthrown? Is there enough momentum behind this?
Yeah, there's definitely in my mind, I have no doubt this regime is going to get overthrown. And I know a lot of Iranians agree with me, because this time is different. We've had at least 4 major uprisings in Iran since this regime came into power. However, this movement, we call it a revolution because we see signs that is showing us people are done with everything that's happening. As Nos mentioned, they're sending their kids, they're sending their children to fight on the streets. So they are completely over. It's like they don't have anything to lose. So they are trying to make it difference for the next generation, if not for themselves. And they're not scared of the regime anymore. People used to be scared. I remember when in 2010, when I was arrested, we just needed one of the guards to raise their hand with their arm, with their gun, and people would start running. But now we get footages from women that go to a group of guards, stand in their faces and shout into their face, "Done with dictator." So this is how frustrated the people are with this regime. So we're definitely going to see a big change. In terms of what we're expecting from future, democracy is definitely number one on the list. We want our people to be able to choose their prime minister, their president. We want to be able to have different practice. We want to be able to practice our own religions aside from the government and what rules they set up. We want to be able to have a life and enjoy our basic rights living in Iran. We want to be able to just, as I said, enjoy freedom and enjoy a great life, just like youth and people in Australia do. So that's the ultimate goal in our minds.
Noz, do you have an image of what the future looks like?
Oh, sorry, my internet was a bit unstable, the connection. So I agree with Naz and what she's expressed. It's something just as basic as women being able to nominate themselves and not have their candidacy excluded from the ballot paper just because of their gender or their preference or their religion or their ethnicity or their political persuasion. It's all about the people finally having a chance to express themselves at the ballot box. It's all about freedom of press, freedom of journalism, freedom to practice your religion, freedom to hold your loved one's hand, freedom to hold your partner's hand and not be pulled over by the morality police and have to justify the nature of your relationship to that other person. People are questioned separately and have to justify their relationship because the morality police want to make sure that your stories match. And just basic freedoms, basic human rights that we are entitled to here in the West. That's what the people of Iran want. And that's what they're fighting for, and that's what they're risking their lives for. Simple freedoms. That's all it comes down to.
Thank you. Yeah, it's those simple freedoms that we take for granted so much in the West of we can decide where we want to educate our children or what books we want them to read or what picture we want to provide for them for their future. So we have a couple more questions. If people, are you guys happy to keep going for one or two more?
Sure.
We might, I'm conscious of time. Maybe.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Can we do one last really good question? All good questions.
They're all, the problem is they're all good questions.
No, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
All right, so this might actually be, what is the message that you want? I know you've talked about us talking about the story and about social media, but if you had to put like your elevator pitch to us of why there are so many issues in the world, why should we, how should we express this message and show why it's so important? What would that be?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. It's very hard to capture the essence of this revolutionary movement in an elevator pitch. I'm really sorry. I'm really going to struggle with this one. That's why I had to pause to collect my thoughts. But I'd say that the message to take away is that the people of Iran have suffered for 43 years under a tyrannical, repressive dictatorship, and enough is enough. It's our responsibility as Westerners, as Western governments, as freedom-loving people to echo their cries for support and echo their voices. Their voices have been stifled for over 43 years. People have now reclaimed their voices. They're all speaking as one strong, united voice, calling for regime change. They're not calling for reform, they're calling for regime change. And it's our responsibility to undo the horrors that have befallen on them and their loved ones who may have been executed, and to restore democracy and freedom to Iran so that the current generation and the future generations can enjoy a free Iran, something that is at reach. It's at reach, but it just needs to be supported along. Otherwise, it will never be something, it will never be reached unless we speak as one here in the West and put that external pressure on the regime and make sure that we are echoing the voices and supporting the legitimate voices of the Iranian people.
I'm glad I paused for this question because it was a difficult question and Nose covered everything perfectly. I guess the only takeaway message I'd like people to have from this amazing event is there is a human rights crisis happening in Iran as we speak. So as humans, we need to take action.
Perhaps now is the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, did someone want to?
I was
Thank you.
going.
Yep. I can't tell who's talking.
Daniel, you
That's what
finish.
happens in a Jewish Zoom call. We all have our own things we want to say. Should we pass it back to the Zoom master and then Melinda? We'll probably wrap up there. Let's try that.
Sorry about that. I couldn't see Melinda. Thank you so much, both Noz and Naz. And I think those two messages of enough is enough, and it's time for voices that haven't been heard to be heard. And I think that's actually, the message of both, or all the organizations that are involved tonight, is about all of these things, is enough, and we need to hear the voices, hear the women, hear the people whose voices have been quieted because they're LGBTI or because they are growing up in a regime. That's what this is all about. So I will add Melinda back to the spotlight and allow her to say her thing and conclude my part of the meeting there.
I was actually just going to suggest that we hand over to Gail.
Yeah.
Right. You hear me?
Yes.
I'm also a historian like you, Speedy, in that I get inspiration from history. And what I'm noticing is that there are 85 million Iranians in Iran. And in 1939, there were 85 million, there were 79 million Germans in Germany. And all the time while you were talking, Naz and Noz, my mind was going back to the Nazi regime that we as Jews particularly relate to, although it doesn't define us. But we are very aware of the Nazi regime, which was totalitarian in its extreme. One of the differences I see is that in Iran, it's a rule of chaos. And in Germany, it was a rule of organization. Very, very distinctly different there. But history repeats itself. And I find that terrifying. So when it was a throwaway line, one of you said that children are reporting on each other and being allowed to attack each other. That to me was horrific. Okay, what's come through is what highly intelligent, thoughtful and sensitive girls you are, what remarkable diplomats you are for freeing Iran. It's going to have to implode because unlike Nazi Germany, the nations are not going to arrive and annihilate it. There won't be an atomic bomb or something equivalent. And so in that sense, the trajectory is going to be different. What is distinctly different and positive for the freedom fighters is that social media gets out. Somehow social media gets out. And so what you are telling us that creep out somehow, people have to look at and believe and now come to our politicians. We have to show them pictures. I don't know how we get them to listen and look. Little grabs, little grabs of what's happening, pointing out that a woman gets murdered for wearing the wrong hijab. That is horrific. And we have to, I think, do it in ones, not in grand numbers, because people relate to single incidents and single instances, not into massive things, but massive things are happening. I wish you girls strength. This has been an inspiration to me personally, and I think to all of us, how strong you are, how brave you are. We say in Hebrew, kol hakavod, all the honor to you that you have brought it here tonight to all of us, and may we join together and see a change sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. That was very eloquently put. And thank you to Speedy and all the organisers of tonight's event. It's such an honour and a privilege to be able to address you all and to have that conversation. My dad was telling me the other night that when he was growing up in Iran during the time of the Shah, before the revolution, he had friends in his classroom that were Jews, Kurds, Turks, Arabs. It was so ethnically and religiously diverse. And he didn't know what religion or what background people belonged to. And he said he only found out some of his friends were Jews, Turks, Arabs after the revolution, because that's where the regime started creating these divisions. And the beauty of what we see tonight and what we see in Iran right now is that people are shoulder to shoulder, irrespective of sexual preference, religion, ethnic group, and belief. And that's such a beautiful thing. And it's such a powerful thing that people aren't allowing these divisions to divide them. They're uniting, they're cohesive. And I thank you all so much for inviting us into your space and allowing us to have these conversations with you. So thank you.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you so much for this platform. It's always difficult to talk when Nos is talking because she's amazing. Yeah, thank you for this.
Oh, you've written different things, guys, different things.
Yeah, thank you for this platform. This is a very difficult time for all of us. It doesn't matter if you are inside Iran or outside. This is still a war for all of us, for me, Nos. So in these difficult times, we appreciate your support. We appreciate you reaching out to us and wanting to find out more about what's happening. And in particular, I know me and Nos have been trying very hard to get media's attention. So getting a call from you, Speedy, asking me to speak at this amazing event was wonderful. I appreciate everyone's time, and feel free to reach out to, I think Nos would be happy to as well. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions or you'd like to find out more.
So I'm going to take the last word. I'd love to tell you about all our upcoming events, and Speedy would like to tell you about hers, but we're not going to do that because you've indulged us long enough. We've put some information in the chats. We have websites. You know what our websites are. We've got your email addresses because you registered. We will send you information. If you have found tonight as moving, as important, and as valuable as I have, you'll find all our other upcoming events to be of the same ilk. Naz, Nos, thank you so very, very much. Stand Up, NCJWA, it's been a very good collaboration, and we'll work together on a statement that Naz and Nos are going to ask your help with. So thank you all and good night.